All right, welcome to episode number 7 of the Nasty Metal Podcast. Now, of course, I've got quite a bit of topics here, and of course some other various stuff I want to talk about. But for sure, one of the main topics for here would be, of course, the Q&A segment. Which, of course, if you had seen episode number 6 of the Nasty Metal Podcast, you would have at least known that from episode 7 here to, of course, throughout the rest of these episodes, I would, of course, was introducing the Q&A segment, which is where basically in all of these episodes from here on out, you basically would, get in at least questions in so I can answer them on all of these Nasty Metal podcasts. So, until I get into that, let's definitely get into, of course, that's some early topics in. For one, let's definitely get in the scheduling for now, which again is just me listing off for at least future scheduling of what to expect here from the next 2 weeks on this channel when it comes to, again, videos and so on. So, let's definitely get this one in here. Alright, so for next week's scheduling, again, which would be this following week, on Monday, the Album of the Week Spotlight will be on the very first Tigers of Pantang album, Wildcat, which of course it is definitely will be reaching its 40th anniversary. And of course for Wednesday's review will be of course for one of the albums that he had received from, of course, Paul of Doomsday's Today Records in that package, which of course will be for a band called Breathalyzer, and the album is titled Demonic Eyeless. What's it? Oboe Concerto in the Rue Morgue. I think that might have been, I don't know, I might have butchered the title, but that will be Wednesday's review. Then Friday's review will be for the band Magic Touch. I believe they are a Swedish band, I believe. And of course the album is titled Heads Have Got to Rock and Roll. And of course then for Sunday, I think will be a box set showcasing, will be episode number 13. I've yet to decide what that will be, but eventually it will definitely be at least a box set showcase. But again, it's right now undecided of what box set it will be. So right now, it's up in the air for that one. It could be the Pretty Maids original album classics, or it will be something else. But so until then, you'll soon find out, at least when it comes to that Sunday, of what box set showcase it will be. And then, of course, on that Monday, will be a Album of the Week spotlight on another anniversary milestone album. That, of course, is none other than the third full-length album from, of course, new wave or British heavy metal, and of course just metal legends in general, Saxon, with of course Strong Arm of the Law, one of the most classic records of all time. That will then be the following Monday's Album of the Week Spotlight, and of course then for that Wednesday review will be for again another release I had received from Paul of Doomsday's Today Records. It's a cassette release for a band called Grandma, and right now looking at the cassette, there's no other title. It just says Grandma. That's about it. So that will be then Wednesday's review. And of course on Friday will of course be the I think this is the very first full-length album for this band. Of course is definitely a well somewhat regarded new wave or traditional heavy metal band who at least has had their demo become quite circulative. I've seen Renee definitely talk about them before. I think even LJ Bioside, I think he has mentioned that before. It's Jet Jaguar, and it's again I think it is their very first full-length album. It's titled Endless Nights, and that will be of course Friday's review. So I think that's pretty much it for these for the content scheduling for these 2 weeks here. So again, I hope all of you will end up be looking forward to that content when it comes out. All right. Since we got all the content scheduling out of the way, it's definitely kind of before I really get into any to the Q&A segment. we do have to take a little bit of a stop here and actually pay our respects to some of the ones who we have just recently lost. Goddamn, but by the time that I've also recorded this, we just also lost drummer Frankie Benali, who was definitely best known for drumming in the bands such as Quiet Riot, and even, of course, Wasp, playing at the albums such as The Headless Children and The Crimson Idol, for example. And I think there might be a few other Wasp albums in there too. Oh yeah, Still Not Black Enough, Unholy Terror, Dying for the World, and of course, good God, I actually own these two. That, of course, is the Neon God, both Parts 1 and Part 2. I actually own those. Those are the only two of those albums with Frankie Benali that I own of him drumming with Wasp. And those are two good albums. Definitely, probably as far as some of the best concept records, probably since The Crimson Idol. But he is definitely his best known for, of course, being the drummer for Quiet Riot. Again, beginning with 1983's Metal Health, all the way up to, of course, last year's Hollywood Cowboys. I don't need to go into any backstory and the hoopla surrounding Hollywood Cowboys, but yeah, that definitely was a little bit of a bummer too. I mean, he's also, looking at his Metal Archives page, he's also worked with the likes of Alex Massey, a band called Black Throne, and there's some band called Freak Show, which was their self-titled album in 2009. Of course, the Hearing Aid Project. He was part of the Hearing Aid Project, which I actually own the 12-inch promotional single for that track, Stars. And of course, then that's about it as far as live groups. Even at one point jammed with Festive Pussycat, and think that ends up being it. Even working with the Japanese metal band Kuni. But yeah. I mean, though, to be quite honest, though, I do have to kind of also somewhat bring up the fact that I kind of almost had a feeling that he wasn't going to live through this. I mean, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer beginning last year, and since of course when it came to, of course, touring with Quiet Riot, at least the tour for the album Hollywood Cowboys, it seemed like again he just had this very much this almost this repetition of just not communicating and just dropping out of the tour, and so on. And I just kind of figure, since how many times he was doing this, you almost could just be figuring that something isn't right. You knew something, but it wasn't right there. Again, many people were questioning, is something wrong? Sent, of course, again, a few after, I think when he did, where all of a sudden he just wasn't answering anybody and was just, also wasn't communicating very much. People were of course reaching out on him through social media, just to wondering what the checkup of what he was up to. And then again, he gave at least a response during those times he did, but still, it just seemed to have had this routine of just basically just staying quiet and not going forward with certain tours. And so just to go on to social media today, when I got up and just to look on and just see the range of posts of just again everyone giving their respects to, of course, Frankie Benali, I had to me, I just was like, I almost had a feeling that this was going to eventually happen. It's sad. It really is. I mean, we've already lost plenty of great, legendary people already this month of August. I mean, we began with, of course, Steve Holland of Molly Hatchet, which that meant that now all of the original members of Molly Hatchet are pretty much no longer alive. And Steve Holland was the last of the original members to then to leave this earth. And of course, in the following a couple of days later, this again, two of the big ones here. Two of the big ones for me. Legendary producer Martin Birch. I think if you had heard my review for, of course, Deep Purple's Whoosh, when mentioning Martin Birch there, when again talking about the producers, you definitely had heard that I rest in peace, Martin Birch. you knew eventually when it came to this podcast, you knew I was going to eventually talk about at least the passing of Martin Birch. Fuck. Probably again, when it comes to producers, this guy definitely left a big fucking mark, but just because of the bands he has worked with. I mean, it's, again, I don't have to mention Deep Purple again. I mean, from there, fuck. I mean, again, beginning, I mean, the one thing about Martin Birch is that when it came to his early career, he actually, again, just started off as a studio engineer. One of his earliest works as being a studio engineer is, of course, on the Jeff Beck Group album, Beckola. And, of course, then, of course, teaming up with, working with Deep Purple on Deep Purple and Rock. Then, of course, Fireball. And, of course, then being the sole engineer, being as, early as Machine Head, and of course Made in Japan, and then of course then we get to Who Do We Think We Are, and of course beginning to be the head producer for Deep Purple, beginning with Burn, Stormbringer, and of course then Come Taste the Band and some of those other live albums like Made in Europe, and I think even as well Made in Japan, or was it Last Night in Japan, Last Day in Japan, something like that. Which again, that record, which would again would be during the Tommy Bolin era of Deep Purple, and of course then getting into then working with Richie Blackmore and Rainbow, and those first three great albums of the Dio era. And of course then get into Whitesnake and those classic blues rock era period of Whitesnake, from the Snakebite EP all the way up to at least 1984 Slide It In. And of course then even then beginning to work with Black Sabbath when Dio joined. Again with now such as Heaven and Hell and The Mob Rules. And of course then Blue Oyster Cult. Cultosaurus Erectus and Fire of Unknown Origin. I mean, again, one of the biggest songs of that period of Blue Oyster Cult was, of course, Burning for You. Martin Birch being the producer for that. That still is, again, a mainstay of classic rock's radio to this day. And, of course, then finally, Iron Maiden. Working, of course, with beginning with bands such as Killers all the way up to, of course, 1992's Fear of the Dark, which was also then it was ultimately the final record Martin Birch ever produced. But a fucking juggernaut career there. Just a fucking juggernaut career of just great albums there. Of course, within there, he was also worked with a lot of other bands, two other artists, whether it be Gary Moore, at some point, I think, the Back on the Streets album. But, was it Back on the Streets? I thought he worked with Gary Moore at some point. But, goddamn. Great, just a juggernaut fucking producer there, with a lot of albums under his boat, and it definitely was for sure a loss, definitely, when it came, a loss for sure for at least the rock world in general and the metal world. Again, one of the most legendary producers. Rest in peace, or rock in peace will definitely be the best term to use. Great, legendary producer. And of course, finally, the second of the biggest, at least, Frankie Benali can be considered definitely a big one, but for me, definitely one of the biggest losses as well of this year so far right now, at least also, again, to be in August here, is Pete Way. Again, one of the former members of UFO, and of course even worked with Wasted, and that was his band they started up after he kind of gave up on the project with Fastity Clark, which of course led, again, Fastway. Not very, I don't know how many people actually do, it should be almost given history that Fastway was a project that was began by Fastity Clark and Pete Way. That's hence why the title Fastway. Fastway, the Fast and Fastway meant for Fastity Clark, and the Way and Fastway meant for Pete Way. That's what the title was. It was basically the combination of both their names. And prior to the recording, Pete Way, of course, basically bailed out. I don't know what most of the the reasons for. It's never been. I never really looked up to see any of the reasons why he backed out of it before the recording. I think he wrote most of the first album, but he backed out of recording. And I don't know if it's ever, and now it's never been noted if he did play on it. There's again, that's always also is usually a something as well when it came to people who back out of stuff before recording and who do probably end up being a part of recording. And again, since they wanted to leave, they don't get the credit. So I don't know if he did play on it or not, but it definitely said he left at least before recording. That's all. So still. Fucking legendary bass player for sure, and of course is also as many people have noted he was one of Steve Harris's inspirations. Definitely was one of Steve Harris's icons, and probably one of those that made him want to pick up a bass guitar in the first place. So definitely one of the most, again, legendary bass player who doesn't really get much the credit that he probably should deserve. I mean, UFO in general doesn't get much the credit that I think they should definitely deserve for definitely being, again, along with Deep Purple, along with Black Sabbath, along with Uriah Heep, and along with even, as some cases, Led Zeppelin, along with Budgie. And even Budgie as a band doesn't get much credit for being pioneers of the metal genre. But UFO, again, along with Scorpions, they definitely deserve that that prize and that level of recognition for being, again, up there as one of the pioneers of the metal genre. I mean, Michael Schenker. After leaving Scorpions, he joins UFO and creates some of the, again, injects a lot of his style and just comes up with a lot of, again, some of the most blueprint era riffs that would definitely set the foundation for, of course, the metal genre. And Pete Way being, of course, one of the writers for a lot of those songs, he does deserve the credit. He deserves fucking credit. And it's a shame that again, how it wouldn't be so bad for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame knew how to pick the right artists to induct. I don't think everybody wouldn't be so shitty towards them. We wouldn't be so at least face palming everything that they fucking do and basically act the way that we do towards the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because again, a band like UFO and Pete Way probably do at least deserve at least a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But because of the stuff that they did, it almost seems like it's pointless now to kind of throw a guy like Pete Way and of course UFO in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because of you don't want them to be next to some artists who probably shouldn't even be there to begin with. Maybe, it's almost pointless. And it's sad, because they do deserve the fucking recognition, along with Thin Lizzy. Again, just a legendary artist. Definitely, again, just a big, a great loss. Definitely, and definitely a sad loss, of course, this year. But yeah, what a way to kind of, again, as the middle we go. I mean, 2020's already been a fucking bullshit year. This has got to be one of the absolute worst fucking years. I mean, again, from the coronavirus to, of course, all the the riots and so on. I mean, it's given that there's almost a riot every fucking year, but just all of a sudden, again, just on top of the coronavirus, and now the artists that we are losing, it just makes it just very much apparent that this is the absolute worst fucking year. Absolutely just one of the worst fucking years. And again, losing some of these legendary artists. Yeah, 2020 is definitely proven to be the and definitely in history as one of the worst years for the world. All right, so I guess within there we can now lead into something more lighthearted. Let's finally get into the Q&A segment of the podcast. Finally, the Q&A segment. I've already rigged you in as long as I could. It's time to finally deliver what you guys, I think, have been wanting to, have been waiting for. That's, of course, is the Q&A segment, where I answer your questions. And again, start beginning with this episode, and of course, going through all the other Nasty Metal podcast episodes. I will be, of course, we'll be answering all your questions. But for right now, let's kick off the very first Q&A segment for the Nasty Metal podcast, beginning with Nasty Metal podcast episode number 7. All right, the Q&A segment. Let's get all the questions here. Let's get to all the fucking questions. All right. Before I answer the Vinyl Transmissions question, which he's got one in here, let's start off with, of course, again, one of my long-time subscribers for this channel. That's, of course, is A. Mulder. Though we're using the same, though I want to ask a question. Are you Stormrider? Did you change your name? Because of that, I swear that same cover was also used for a subscriber of mine named Stormrider. I wonder if you're the same one, because of, again, I look closer at the name. It's definitely seemed to be a different name. I wonder, did you change your name or you're somebody else? Just a curious question of mine. All right, now I'm on to answering your question. So again, from A. Mulder, this again is the question here is, hi Ben. What are your top 10 favorite albums of all time and why? So, to answer your question, I will tell you this. I've was working on this list anyways, and I was thinking, before beginning to come up with the answer for you, I was again, thinking of the albums. Then if I finally hit me, I've got this list already made. It's on my Rate Your Music page. Because I was planning on making this as a episode, but since I have to deliver a answer for the Nasty Metal podcast, for the very first Q&A segment, instead of doing that, I am going to be listing my top 10 favorite albums of all time, and basically this is also some of the albums that definitely definitely impacted me. And were one of the ones that definitely, for sure, turned me on to a lot of the genre. And definitely were the albums that definitely, again, it just impacted me for years and just made the biggest impressions on me. And definitely to this day are still absolute favorites of mine. All right, so here we go. Number 10, I actually listed Flick of the Switch from AC/DC. Now, normally when people talk about the top 10 favorite albums, and if they do end up listing an AC/DC record, you're never going to get Flick of the Switch. But there's a reason why I do list Flick of the Switch, and I've already, I think every time I've talked about this album a couple of times, especially when on the topic of AC/DC, I've said very many times that Flick of the Switch was one of my earliest AC/DC albums, one of the earliest albums I've ever heard from them. I mean, Ball Breaker was the very first AC/DC record. I heard that's because it was released on the time that I was born. It was released on that year of 1995, and again, I was born that same year, and so it was definitely throughout my childhood. It was always, at least in some way, shape, or form, was in a music player, and it was always either on the speakers. So it's just one of those albums that definitely left an impression. But Ball Breaker didn't really make the impression that Flick of the Switch did. I mean, around this same time was also Let There Be Rock. I think those two albums were purchased, but Flick of the Switch, for some reason, I always gravitated towards, even though I love Let There Be Rock. Let There Be Rock is one of the most classic AC/DC records of all time, and it's still one of my go-to Bon Scott era AC/DC albums, along with, for sure, Power Edge, and even Highway to Hell, and even Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. But as far as when it comes to my go-to AC/DC record in general, it surprisingly ends up being Flick of the Switch because of just how many times I played this album over and over when I was young. I mean, it left the biggest impression. I mean, of the Brian Johnson era AC/DC albums, it is for sure one of the best albums of that era, of the Brian Johnson era. But it's just in general, I just love a bit of the sound. I mean, to some people, when people, if they have any complaints about the record, it would also be the dry production, because again, Angus and Malcolm Young were the producers on it. They definitely at least ditched Mutt Lange. But the thing is, it was one of the main characteristics of the record for me. I loved it. Just sounded heavy to me as a kid. In some ways, for AC/DC record, it still somewhat sounds heavy. Even if it isn't nearly metal, it still has a heaviness to it. I mean, goddamn, the fucking the hypnotic rhythm feel, of course, of stuff like This House is on Fire, the title track, Nervous Shakedown, Landslide, fucking Guns for Hire. Even Deep in the Hole, I actually fucking love. But then, of course, get other tracks such as Bedlam in Belgium, Badlands, and of course, Brain Shake. And Brain Shake and Bedlam in Belgium are prime classic AC/DC. Definitely have that Bon Scott era riff feel to them. Just great 2 tracks, and definitely one of the, again, up there is one of the most underrated AC/DC songs. But goddamn, to me, there really isn't a bad song. I do dig also Rising Power. Again, I think it's definitely one of those cult favorite AC/DC records for sure. So it's definitely, and the thing is, again, it's one of the AC/DC records that left a big impression on me as a kid, and definitely was the beginning of just me becoming a fan of these guys. And to this day, I am a fucking diehard fan. So it's just one of those albums that really kicked off my obsession with AC/DC. So it's why it's on the list. I mean, it's low, but of course, it makes sense. I mean, of course, number 9, Wheels of Steel from Saxon is actually, again, one of my absolute favorite albums, because of one of the main reasons is it was my introduction to Saxon. I've again, when I covered this album as one of my album of the weeks, I've stated that when I had gotten this, was it the 100 top bands of all time, or metal bands, I think, of all time, or rock, something like that. On the cover, of course, featured Corey Taylor of Slipknot. Right? I purchased this at Winco down in Fresno, California, back in, oh god, I believe it was 2006. I think it was 2006, and 2006, 2005, 2006. I know for sure it had to have been 2006, but this magazine and the list of bands in there was another great way of just introducing me to some bands I had never really heard of. And Saxon was actually one of the bands listed in that magazine, along with another band I'll eventually will then get into. But Saxon was one of the bands, but for some reason I didn't feel obligated to want to check them out. But when I finally did warm up and decided to check out Saxon, after again just thinking of that magazine and just wanting to check them out, one of the first songs I go and check out is actually 747 Strangers in the Night. And this is by the time I was already even getting in heavily into like Diamond Head and some of the other new wave or British heavy metal bands like Tigers of Pantang. But I just checked this track out. I'm like, this sounds pretty cool. Then I end up checking out songs such as Motorcycle Man and Stand Up and Be Counted. I'm like, I love these guys. I fucking love these guys. I need to go out and get this record. I need to go find Wheels of Steel. And sure enough, when I go down to Fresno that year of 2010, I walk out of Rasping It with, of course, Wheels of Steel and On Through the Night from Def Leppard. And Wheels of Steel was for sure, it wouldn't leave my CD player. It would not. I loved every fucking song off that album. That's why for sure it has just left a big impression on me. It's still late. It's kind of getting late into my in my journey and so on. When just coming to like just discovering just these bands and so on. But it for sure it just left an impression on me. And to this day, it's one of the reasons of just making me a absolute Saxon fan. So definitely, for sure, it deserves a place in my top 10 favorite albums of all time. Number 8 is, of course, his Iron Fist from Motorhead. Again, as one of the, the very first Motorhead record I ever purchased was Rock and Roll, and that was a good album. That's definitely an underappreciated Motorhead record, and I played the fuck out of that album at the time, but for some reason, Iron Fist just made a bigger impression on me. This was the second Motorhead record I purchased, actually. This was the second Motorhead record I got, and goddamn, there's something so infectious about this one. This is, by some, this is either considered one of Motorhead's best records, or at times it's also considered one of their weakest material. I'm on the fence. I almost consider this to be one of Motorhead's best records. I think it was a great record from start to finish. The production and so on. I know, Lemmy and Cassidy Clark definitely have their dislikes of the record. I know they had they kind of shared some of their, their disappointments with the album, but I think it's a solid album, start to finish. You open up with, again, one of the most iconic Motorhead songs, next to like Ace of Spades and Overkill. It's Iron Fist. And after that, we get one of the earliest thrash songs, that being Heart of Stone, and that my fucking jaw dropped. I was already kind of hearing bands like Venom at this time, but good God, the riff to Heart of Stone, it was fucking heavy for me. This was going from listening to Rock and Roll and hearing this record, it just sounded raw, and it had a very biting guitar tone. Cassidy Clark just sounded like he was fucking possessed on this record. There's just so many infectious riffs on here that I just love. I love Song Touches America, Saxon Outrage, Speed Freak, Bang the Rights, I Don't Need Religion, and fucking, there's just not a song here that I don't like. It's a classic record. Loser. Yeah, and Go to Hell, which is, again, not an Alice Cooper cover, but goddamn, there's just infectious fucking songs on this one, and it's still one of my go-to Motorhead records. I love Iron Fist, so I think it definitely was the Motorhead record that really left the biggest impression on me, for sure. Just a classic record, and the thing is, I bought the deluxe edition of it, which of course came with the audio recording, of course, of the Canada show from 1982. It is a raw and at times very sloppy show as well for some reason. But at the time, I played the fuck out of that disc too, so I didn't really give a shit. It was live Motorhead. And it's not the most best produced sound. Again, every bit of the, Cassidy Clark at times is definitely kind of fucking up some notes here and there. But to be quite honest, I just could not get enough of that show. So definitely, that whole record, it definitely left a pretty good impression. It definitely was one of those that really just made me a Motorhead fan to this day. So that's at number 8. Number 7 is Diary of a Madman from Ozzy Osbourne, and it really, while again not my introduction to Ozzy. My introduction to Ozzy was, I kept thinking it had to have been the Ozmith Comet compilation disc, the best of Ozzy. It had to have been that album, but then I go back, and it was Paranoid from Black Sabbath was actually my introduction to Ozzy, really. But again, that Ozmith Comet disc was played a lot along with No More Tears. So those were definitely the ones that definitely made an impression. But the thing is, on that Ozmith Comet disc, there was a song called Over the Mountain. And that song just had an infectious fucking riff to it. Randy Rhoads, and it was one of my introductions to him too. And goddamn, what a riff that song was. But the thing is, I knew I had to also at least check out that disc, and the thing is, when there was a point in time where I think was it my parents and so on, we had went to spend time at one of my dad's friends' cabins. I think it was Gary or so. I Thing is, one of the discs that was in the cabin was a copy of Diary of a Madman, and I just pretty much told him, put that album on, put that fucking disc on. And the thing is, hearing that whole record there, and every time I do think of the time of spending at that cabin. And the thing is, it's also, again, it just became one of my all-time favorite Ozzy Osbourne albums of all time. And so, again, when it came to, of course, when coming up with at least my go-to Ozzy albums, Diary of a Madman is definitely my go-to Ozzy record. I mean, hands down, one of his crowning achievements. Every time I always fucking hear, especially recently when it came to, of course, fucking Ordinary Man, and hearing all the reviews and the interviews, at least for Ozzy, has always said, I still haven't yet made my Sgt. Pepper's. Like, it seemed like he always had a way of just disliking every bit of his material. But the thing is, everyone, again, along with me, along with other guys, everyone on these pages would go, you did. It was Diary of a Madman. The thing is, Diary of a Madman was the closest to one of Ozzy's most best crowning achievements. And the thing is, as much as I do dig some of the albums after this, again, I do dig Bark of the Moon, I do dig Ultimate Sin, I do dig No Rest for the Wicked, and I even do dig, for sure, No More Tears, just because of the nostalgic memories that album holds for me. But Diary of a Madman holds just as much nostalgic memories for me. I'll even say, I think Diary of a Madman blows away Blizzard of Oz. And I'm going to cover Blizzard of Oz on this channel. And yes, I do like that album. But Diary of a Madman, to me, it's just hands down what is my absolute favorite Ozzy record. I just love every bit of this record. Also, down to even Max Norman's production job. It just sounds big, massive, and huge. And Randy Rhoads hasn't been felt any better, and the thing is, it's almost seems to be crazy that this was Randy Rhoads' swan song, because eventually after this album, we would lose Randy Rhoads in that god awful plane crash. But for a final record, you can't go any more on top than Diary of a Madman. The riff work and the guitar work on Diary of a Madman, it just smokes. And again, it's one of my absolute favorite work of Randy Rhoads. He just sounds like he literally is in the fucking zone on that album. Nothing is basically keeping that guy down. He's just fucking yanking at it from top to bottom. Fantastic work, fantastic guitar playing, and one of some of the best sounds from Ozzy. The thing is, it has been kind of tough for Ozzy to make a good record, because he doesn't have the team of Randy Rhoads, Lee Kerslake, and Bob Daisley on board. They were the three ingredients that made Ozzy during that solo period. They were the writing team, and without them, that's why the albums haven't been nearly as top quality, because he doesn't have that team anymore. So, many ways, he can fucking go off and he can stroke his dick about on how much fucking this fucking Andrew Watt guy, he can go on say and jizz all over fucking Andrew Watt and say how he is some of the best musicians he's ever worked with. But the thing is, he can't hold a fucking candle, let alone a fucking Balteet, to the levels of Randy Rhoads and Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake. He doesn't hold a fucking tea to any of those guys. So, it kind of turned into a little rant there. But that will be that's number 7 here on my top 10 favorite albums of all time. Number 6 is Free For All from Ted Nugent, actually. For some reason, I almost felt like changing this album, but the thing is, I think in many ways, it kind of does stay in because of the memories. While the best, or was it the Great Gonzo, the very best of Ted Nugent, that disc, that was my introduction to Ted Nugent. But finding a cassette copy of Free For All, I played that fucking cassette all the time. There just wasn't a song on that album that I don't like. And also, again, it has my absolute favorite Ted Nugent song, that being Hammer Down. Good God, one of the most underrated Ted Nugent track of all time, and also up there's one of the heaviest songs from Ted Nugent. It's a fucking heavy banger for sure for Ted Nugent, and the thing is, As much as I dig some of the other Ted Nugent records, I think Free For All, for just, again, for the nostalgic memories and for Hammered Down alone, it's one of my, for sure, hands down, my favorite Ted Nugent record. So, Free For All is at number 6. Oh boy, come to number 5, we got a fucking, this can take up most of this fucking video, right? This is definitely going to take up quite a bit of this podcast. That's because of number 5 is Machine Head from Deep Purple. I mean, when thinking of Deep Purple records to probably add in to my list of the albums they add in, it was almost kind of tough to kind of pick which one, but then it just became, the more I then think about it, it was then easy to pick Machine Head. I mean, again, when talking about some of these albums, some of these albums on here weren't really my introductions to some of these bands, but eventually it led into records that just became more bigger impressions on me. My introduction to Deep Purple was amps such as Perpendicular and Abandon, okay? Those were, of course, my introduction, and Perpendicular was a new record at that time. It was a new record for the band, at least by the time it was released. It's a year after I was born. And again, my dad, of course, who was a huge fucking Deep Purple fan, of course, he was going to check it out because of new guy in the band. Again, Steve Morse, who was the album that kicked off the Steve Morse era, which again, in many ways, seems to have ended with this year's 21st album, Whoosh, which again, I covered already on this channel. But the thing is, again, one of the biggest impressions that Perpendicular had made for me was because of the very first song, Ted the Mechanic. Goddamn, when realizing when I figured out what was the, the repeat button on the fucking CD player, or the stereo player, that opening riff of fucking Ted Mechanic, I would push that repeat button every time after it ends. I would go on and push it and push it. I might have been one of the reasons why I probably added so many scratches on that fucking disc. But the thing is, besides all that, I mean, I would fucking, as a kid, I would go apeshit for that riff. But of course, again, other memories of that record was, of course, was hearing it playing in the car. I think it might have been one that was being played. As far as my vivid memories of going through Nashville or driving through there on that family trip. I mean, that disc was in the car all the time. But the thing is, as much as that was my introduction to Deep Purple, what makes me why I chose Machine Head for this list was more so for the fact that I just remember one night as a kid. This again had to be in the late 90s, early 2000s. It had to been either 1999 or 2000, as far as I remember. All I remember is I go up to at least to my parents' bedroom and the closet. There is this box in the closet here, and it's a big box, okay? I go inside this, I just decide, again, it had to be very much a late afternoon, almost close to being dawn, or again in the nighttime. I just remember browsing through this box and just sorting through it. Just again, it's all again. There's some CDs, plenty of CDs in here. And the thing is, as far as players I can get to was a PlayStation. So the PlayStation was out, and it was again was also in many ways you can play CDs on the PlayStation again to listen to music. So I'm going through this box, and what do I pull out as a copy of Deep Purple's Machine Head? And the thing is, what just caught me is the cover art, which as a kid, it was bizarre to look at. In many ways, it's just like, what the fuck is this? And the thing is, I recognize the name. It's Deep Purple. I love I listened to quite a bit of the Perpendicular and Abandon. And so I'm like, what does this sound like? I got it. My fucking curiosity just got at me. It's like, I got to put this disc on. So I go on and I go into I go to, of course, the PlayStation. I knew how to turn it on, and so again, this little young fucking kid who's curious, who is curious about listening to this. I know how to use the PlayStation, again, playing games and so on it. So I put the disc in. The first song is Highway Star. Just from that opening fucking riff, Then, of course, then hearing the air raid siren of Ian Gillan. I mean, I was very familiar with the way he sounded. I mean, there's more deep vocals. But the thing is, during those Perpendicular records, he barely, and Abandon, he wasn't doing all those air raid screams very much. He wasn't using them all that much. But just hearing him in his young state on this record and him belting out that air raid siren scream, and then get into that fucking main riff, finally when the actual song just kicks in, I think as this little kid, I mean, I was already aware of bands like Korn and so on, and the thing is, none of it really made too much of an impression on me. Again, it was just, to me, just modern radio, but going back and hearing some of this old shit, and this album was released in 1972, and just hearing this, again, I think my fucking jaw goddamn dropped, and I'm like, I had never heard nothing like this. I don't ever recall hearing on the radio. This track just did it for me. And I think in many ways, I think I might have skipped some of the songs just to kind of, again, my curious, I just got to check, is anything else going to be as close to fucking Highway Star? And again, the thing is, as I would listen to this record over and over the course of the years, every bit of song just fucking, again, it got embedded in my brain. I mean, from Maybe I'm a Leo to Pictures of Home. Good God. Pictures of Home is a classic fucking track, and eventually I'll have to probably talk more about this record in my Album of the Week. When I do a Album of the Week spotlight on the sound, which will eventually come at least in 2 years when it reaches its anniversary. But I think is I want to talk about the rest of the goddamn album. I just want to. It just left a goddamn impression on me, and it's in many ways is my favorite Deep Purple record, and it's why it is in my top 10 favorite lists here. But I gotta restrain myself from talking more about it, because I might as well just. I mean, it would just seem like I'm just gonna give away all of my video and all of my review and so on. So I'm just gonna end it there. So at number 5 is Machine Head. Just a classic record, and definitely, as you can tell, it left a fucking impression on me. Number 4 is actually Sabotage from Black Sabbath. And I mean, I already just mentioned that Paranoid was my introduction to at least Ozzy, as well to, of course, Black Sabbath. I mean, for sure, Iron Man was just the song, I think, because since I was into a lot of comic books, especially on... Oh God, I believe it was Fox Kids. They had, of course, some of the Marvel comic book cartoons on there, again, like Iron Man. So on, again, I was a big Iron Man fan. I was growing up, again, I loved the cartoon. The thing is, my dad puts on Paranoid, and of course, goes to the song Iron Man. I played that fucking intro all over in the whole song. And again, it just left an impression. But the Black Sabbath album that really left, again, an impression on me was actually Sabotage. I mean, some of those early Black Sabbath records are fucking fantastic. I love those early Black Sabbath records. Again, from the self-titled first album to Paranoid to, of course, even Master of Reality and Volume 4. And even to an extent, I do dig Sabbath Blaze Sabbath, even though I know plenty of people do love that record. But for some reason, Sabotage definitely left a pretty good impression on me. Probably the most biggest impression. I mean, it was the Black Sabbath album I actually was given as a Christmas gift. And good God, when that disc was thrown onto the stereo, the first song, just hearing Hole in the Sky, good God, that riff and everything was something about it. And of course, after that track goes, it then leads into, of course, that instrumental. Which, and we kind of go on to Sabotage here to look up the song here, because I'm starting to have a blank memory here. Don't Start Too Late, which is, again, it's a 49-second acoustic guitar intro, but it's got a dark feel to it. It still sounds heavy, and for some reason, it definitely was like, this is interesting. And then when that intro then ends, or that acoustic track ends, we then get into Symptom of the Universe. And already I'm like, this is fucking heavy. This album was released in 1975, but goddamn, even in 2005, had to have been 2005 or 2004. That's a fucking heavy fucking riff. Even at that time and age, that's a heavy fucking riff. And of course, that album was also played plenty of times in the car. But the thing is, to this day, that is it just left the biggest impression on me. It is forever my favorite Black Sabbath record, especially of the Aussie era. So, Sabotage. I mean, it was my number one album from my top list of 1975 that I did at least a year ago. So it definitely is one of my absolute favorite records from Black Sabbath. So at number 3 here, we of course have Screaming for Vengeance from Judas Priest. My introduction to Judas Priest though was the Living After Midnight, the very best of Judas Priest, and that definitely that was my introduction to Judas Priest, and I played that disc. I mean, I talked about it, I think a few times that I didn't know who Judas Priest were until when I got back from school in like 2002 or early 2003. Goddamn, I came back from school, and again opening up my dad was a member of the BMG Club when it was still a fucking thing in the 2000s. Still, he would order quite a bit off the BMG Club website, and we opened up the box and so on, and in there was a copy of Living After Midnight, the very best of Judas Priest, and the artwork and everything just seemed cool to me. I was like, this seems cool. I want to hear this. I think the thing is, we cracked open the plastic and so on, and we put the disc in, and the thing is, the first riff that comes on, again, is their cover of Green Manolation. I just talked, and the thing is, I've said many times, that one of the earliest, that track was heavy. It's a cover track, but goddamn, it's a great fucking heavy track. One of my, for sure, definitely left an impression on me about Judas Priest, and eventually, my dad then pulls out his copy of Screaming for Vengeance, and he puts on the record player. I mean, he was always sorting through it again, also to find at least AC/DC's High Voltage, but he finds Screaming for Vengeance, he puts that record on, and I think he kind of went to at least side 2. He actually started off, I think, with side 2, I believe, just to kind of get to You've Got Another Thing Coming, because it was in the video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And again, it was one of my favorite songs to begin with anyways of Judas Priest. But the thing is, I think he might have started at the very first track of at least of that second side. That would have been the title track. Oh my god, it is also one of my favorite songs from Judas Priest, and it was just so great to hear at least them play the song Screaming for Vengeance when I saw them live back in 2015. And it was it's just one of my absolute favorite songs for sure, and again, just a classic speed metal tune. That definitely is the definition of 80s fucking metal, is with the song Screaming for Vengeance from Judas Priest. I mean, that record, in many ways, many will say, that is the definitive 80s metal record. I can even throw in again Restless and Wild from Accept in there. That is those are two definitive 80s metal records, and definitely are one of the, again, the biggest blueprint sounds, or again, preferences when trying to find albums that come close to that, because of that is a big preference. It's like, when you think of 80s metal, I think of records such as Screaming for Vengeance and Restless and Wild of Accept. Just two, again, great records there. And speaking of Restless and Wild from Accept, that is my number 2 pick in my top 10 favorite albums. And I was just re-listening to this record again just the other day, and at least over recording this, and it still holds up. My introduction again to Accept was the winning was it the best it was like, I think it was the best of both or something. It was again had songs for both Balls to the Wall and Restless and Wild, and I've showed that disc plenty of times on here. That was my introduction, and the thing is, I knew of them because of the song Balls to the Wall, but the opening song was Fast as a Shark. And just from that intro, that fucking that German piece, and then of course getting again and then as the song goes, and eventually you get the Neil getting pulled off from the fucking record, and then getting into, of course, the song and Udo's scream, and then the song itself. That was some heavy fucking shit. That was some heavy shit. And again, for 1982, that is considered one of the earliest speed metal, or at times one of the earliest thrash metal songs. And that just left an impression. The thing is, most of that disc, my favorite stuff was for Restless and Wild. And so eventually, years later, I would buy a copy of Restless and Wild. And of course, Recycled Records in Reno. And it would end up being, of course, the German pressing of it on Brain. So, again, just one of my go-to Accept records, and it's one of my absolute favorite Accept albums, and it's one of my absolute favorite albums of all time. So, for sure, in many ways, it is, it definitely is one of my favorite albums of all time, and it definitely deserves, it deserved a spot on this list. So, finally, what is my number one pick? What is my number one pick for this? It is none other than Melissa from Merciful Fate. This was the album that really kicked off of me wanting to actually make the list to begin with, and why I wanted to do a video of it anyways, because of me finally to at least finally add this album into my collection. I mean, this album left some of the biggest impressions on me as well. I mean, I already went through again the decade almost basically of going through taking you all of you into my journey and into at least my head of what the albums, again, just the stuff that just made an impact on me. Fucking Melissa was one of the last records that really made one of the biggest impact, and just again was one of those albums that really kicked off just me searching for every other band and so on. But this record, and the thing is, when I mentioned Saxon, I mentioned that one magazine that I had gotten at Winco, which again was at the top 100 bands of all time on there, and again a list, of course, with Corey Taylor on the fucking magazine. In one of the bands that was listed there besides Saxon was Merciful Fate. That's how I knew of the band Merciful Fate, but I didn't really almost get into one of checking them out until many years later when my brother was the one who was really getting heavily into them. And the thing is, the song I think he was playing a lot was actually a song off of Into the Shadows. Or In the Shadows, actually, I think it's titled. Which, of course, with the song Is That You, Melissa? Which is a catchy fucking metal track, alright? It's such a catchy track. The fact that wasn't a huge hit as well is surprising. Because, again, it's got a hook to it. And it's a catchy, hypnotic track, of course. But I liked it, and I was like, can I check out any more fucking Merciful Fate albums? And the thing is, this is of course during the time when I think he was very much heavily into downloading a lot of stuff. So yes, my first introduction, my at least memories of listening to Merciful Fate was in downloadable CDR form. And the thing is, again, the album I really go to check out is actually Melissa. The thing is, I think at the time, this was 2008, I believe it was 2008. I think I was looking for a disc to play on the way to, of course, going to the $1 or $5 the $5 movie theater, which again see the movie Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. So I picked, of course, I was looking again. I was picking a disc to go on. And I picked again the CDR copy of Melissa to listen to on the way to the theater. And so I put the disc on. What's the first song that comes on? It's Evil. Good Lord. Every song after, I was just reeled in. I was reeled in from the fucking minute that song came on. And from there, I just was like, again, from the riffs, again, just a guitar playing off again with guys such as Michael Denner and Hank Sherman. And of course, again, the fucking rhythm section, of course, of Timmy Grabber and Kim Ruz, who again, rest in peace, those two. They were some of the best rhythm section for at least a band, and they definitely were one of the key ingredients of making up that early Merciful Fate sound. And Kim Ruz, one of the most overlooked drummers of all time. I put him next to guys like Cozy Powell as well, and even as well. The thing is, he even almost can say that he might as well have been the John Bonham of Merciful Fate because of his drum tone and the way he sounded. It was just heavy, had a real big fucking massive sound, and it really just added the charm to at least that early Merciful Fate sound. And and again, a great drummer too. He was definitely a fantastic drummer. But the thing is, one of the other key ingredients to, of course, Merciful Fate was the iconic voice of King Diamond. I mean, I was already hearing guys like Ian Gillan, Rob Halford, Klaus Meine. I was just here, and I'm trying to think of anybody else. I think that's even Bruce Dickinson. You know, I heard a lot of these guys. And the thing is, again, even also David Byrne of Uriah Heep. I was hearing all these guys, but fucking King Diamond, he just something about him was just, again, he belongs in that list. But the thing is, he was like the next step above those guys, like the next level of just expanding on, again, just those talents of those vocalists, just that high octave sound, and then the falsetto. But the thing is, his range on these Merciful Fate records were a lot more different than, of course, his range on his King Diamond solo albums, and of course then, which is something he also would then bring into a lot of the later reunion era Merciful Fate records in the 90s. But his in many ways, his range on these early Merciful Fate records was just fantastic. He just knew on what range to use instead when it came to his mids, when to use them right, and it just added to the overall hypnotic feel of these songs, and just made them come to light in many ways. It just came to life in every bit in many ways. Just fantastic stuff. Definitely one of them, again, and the thing is, again, Melissa is just one of those go-to albums. I mean, when you almost would think you probably have heard every bit of the best classic records of all time, and then this record, then I listen to Melissa, and I'm like, where the fuck has this album been in my life? I loved every bit of this record. It's, again, one of my absolute favorite albums. Lyrics and everything, it just added to the overall feel of the band in many ways. In many ways, it's, again, it's just like a wrestler. You may have the talents, but the thing is, you also have to have the gimmick as well in order to set someone over and to get you over with somebody. And the thing is, in many ways, these say the sort of the satanic themes of the band, it was the gimmick for them. Even though King Diamond may have definitely believed in it, but the thing is, just like Rob Halford bringing in the sort of almost slightly gay BDSM kind of stuff, the leather and all of that, into Judas Priest, the same thing can be said for at least with King Diamond and his religion. It was his kind of, again, his BDSM kind of look. It's what was, again, the thing that kind of set Merciful Fate, again, when it came to the gimmick, because before that, it was almost seemed like kind of weird of what else. It's like they had all the tools and everything, but the thing is, what did they do to kind of set the band up, at least, to kind of get them at least some sort of attention? There you go. And King Diamond decided to go with his personal choice, and it worked for Merciful Fate. It definitely made them seem dangerous with a lot of the parents. I mean, the song Into the Coven was on the Filthy 15 list from the PMRC and Tipper Gore. But still, apparently that did something for the band. So definitely it was many things that set the band apart from, at least from other bands. I mean, you had Venom, but the thing is, it was all just used for shock. It was all just, in many ways, it was all for entertainment. They didn't believe in it. Kronos wasn't really a pure satanic believer. He just wanted to use it as a way, as some sort of engine. I mean, it was all meant for shock, and just to get to see how many people they can piss off with it. Whereas King Diamond believed in a lot of it, but in many ways, it got the band a bit of attention. It got them some notoriety, and it worked a bit in their favor. The only problem why they didn't last is because of the personal differences with the band and the musical directions between, again, Hank Sherman and the rest of the band of King Diamond. So definitely that was the only setback that got them. I mean, if they had kept going, we probably would have seen, and maybe the stuff we've seen with King Diamond would have been with Merciful Fate. But still, if they had kept going and kept the name, they would have just been, again, Pretty Maids, one of the biggest bands that come out of Denmark. So there you go. That is, again, I have to just kind of stop there now. So there you go. There is my top 10 favorite lists, and those were the reasons why those are my top 10 favorite albums. So thank you for A. Mulder to, of course, that question. So that definitely, I knew that was going to take a lot of the podcast here, but the thing is, I had to at least get all that in. So I think it probably made this podcast very, very interesting. A lot of a good insight into my musical taste and so on for you. And the Melissa probably one of the heavier records on there. I mean, it might be something that, it might have been a little disappointment of me not adding in any extreme metal or thrash, at least to represent those genres. But the thing is, I had a ton of albums that really made an impact, and those did. Those were the albums that made the biggest impact on me. So thank you, A. Mulder, again for that question. Now on the vinyl transmission, this is probably a shorter answer, but this, of course, his question is: who would win a battle of the bands in an epic throwdown to decide the ultimate southern rock band? Now, since I already at the beginning of this video, I of course said when talking about the paying respects to, of course, a lot of the deceased members, I had mentioned Steve Holland of, again, Molly Hatchet. Molly Hatchet would definitely be in that Battle of the Bands one. And of course, now we're throwing, of course, legendary artists such as Leonard Skinner, even the Allman Brothers Band, and of course, then even throw in, for sure, Blackfoot. But who would win? On one hand, we have the Allman Brothers Band, who definitely were one of the earliest southern rock bands. They had very 60s, very bluesy feel to them, very laid back compared, but they definitely have their own unique feel. And of course, on the other hand, we have Leonard Skinner, who started to inject a little bit more energy into the music, definitely giving it way more of a classic rock feel. I definitely would pave the way for bands like Molly Hatchet and Blackfoot. They definitely have a more of a straight up classic rock sound to them. That's when we then get the Molly Hatchet, who are then the next step up from, of course, Leonard Skinner. They would be on this bill too. So when it comes to, again, we all go by the energy. Who would probably put on the best concert to really win over everyone? Again, in just typical Battle of the Bands fashion. You get, again, Molly Hatchet were the ones infusing a little bit more of a metallic edge to them, almost being a little heavier, but still probably not as energetic as Blackfoot, not nearly as metallic as them, because at Blackfoot were definitely injected even much more of a straight-up, wild, hard and heavy feel to them that at times is a lot more heavier than Molly Hatchet. Though Molly Hatchet definitely had a heaviness to them, and definitely kind of, again, were just as much of an appeal to, of course, the new wave or British heavy metal crowd. Again, I think in some of the pictures, Dave Hubbeck was actually sporting a AC/DC shirt, and I think it was for Beating the Odds. On the back cover there, I've noticed he's like wearing an AC/DC shirt. So definitely kind of showed you a lot of the stuff he was trying to, again, to infuse into the sound. They were much heavier than Leonard Skinner, but Blackfoot were much as heavier than Leonard Skinner and Molly Hatchet. Ricky Medlock, his fucking tone, his guitar tone, and the way it just had a really more of a straight up heavy hard rock sound to it that at times really, really did border on to a lot of the metal stuff. And I mean, when you get to songs like Warped and Fox Chase, and of course, Good Morning, that's some heavy shit for, at least when it came to at least any southern rock band, that's some heavy shit. So, if we're going to have to go by it, if you were to combine, I guess, most of these members into to at least a Battle of Bands, you almost can say that any members, that would be the ultimate southern rock band. But if we're going to have to go by it, as far as the stage attitude, oh boy, I almost would want to give it to Blackfoot. Even though I love Molly Hatchet, and Molly Hatchet, if we're going by at least the days of them, they almost would win that Battle of the Bands to be at least the ultimate southern rock band. They probably would be the winners. But in many ways, it all comes down to being very subjective, so I really can't give a definitive answer But it's really, to me, somewhere between at least me, Molly Hatchet or Blackfoot. It really falls somewhere between there. So in many ways, I guess you could say it's a tie. So, but that could be me just being biased and when it comes to at least just my preference, even though, again, I have a lot of respect for Lynyrd Skynyrd. They are definitely, again, one of the earliest artists I listen to a lot. So it really just comes down there. But if we're going by modern era Lynyrd Skynyrd, fucking Molly Hatchet beats... it beats them by a fucking long shot. It fucking beats them. I mean, any of the modern Molly Hatchet albums are at times 10 times better than any of the modern Lynyrd Skynyrd stuff. So fucking Molly Hatchet would win that one by a fucking landslide. They would fucking win. But if we're also going by modern time, if you're to put modern era Lynyrd Skynyrd in the fucking 70s, or at least the early 80s, Blackfoot would probably end up winning. That would be it. But that's probably, again, that's my answer to that. Alright, so I think this has gone on. I almost feel like about throwing in wrestling here, but right now I don't really have very much to talk about. I think it's gone on pretty long. So with that, this was a very interesting Nasty Metal podcast. So with that, I hope y'all enjoyed. And again, we'll just again let you know, get your answers in. Get your fucking answers into at least the comments section. If you want to hear me answer any more, again, to keep up these Q&A segments for a lot of these Nasty Metal podcasts, get in your fucking answers. And I will then answer them on the next Nasty Metal podcast. Will be next Nasty Metal podcast episode number 8. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed this Every Thrash. I say I'm out. And I'll see y'all later. Take care, everyone, and all have a good fucking week.